yeah, kind of hard to focus on, yeah, to get it all together. So yeah, there's tons of good videos out there from Quasi and the Blood family. But however, I will just get some things out in my way. I think it's like everyone has its own way on explaining things, and it's pretty helpful for also for uh, people who just found blood over intent and just trying to get like infos from everywhere, researching still, and so it's kind of good to have lots of different ways of explaining and pointing out the Holy Grail and yeah, what's been going on here. So yeah, I've been diving a little bit into the topic of on how the world was looking before the giant trees were cut down, or yeah, also how this affected like life and how it terraformed our place. Yeah, it's kind of like you know, the giant trees, the info of the giant trees being cut down and seeing now mountain as what they are has, that was for me a, I don't know, it just turned my world upside down. It's amazing to imagine how beautiful it must have been, and to know that we're gonna bring back the giant trees is really I can't wait to see it, really. So yeah, so this topic is really fascinating me, and okay, I'm just gonna get into it. So yeah, there was this flood everybody talks about, and before the flood, Earth was a paradise, and yeah, there were many giant trees, and in the middle of the flat plain, at the center, was the tree of life. And now there is the aurora borealis shooting out, and there is a magnetic mountain still, and probably the magnetic mountain at the center are the remains of the tree of life. So everything is electromagnetism, and the tree of life being now a magnetic mountain is like it's like showing that there is a source of all life. So before this earth was covered with a forest of giant trees, and this had some effects on the climate. It was warm everywhere and moist. It was kind of like a tropical climate everywhere, and I mean, they're telling you that in science, and the giant trees really explain really well why it was like this, because yeah, the trees, they really the vegetation, and especially trees, they really create the climate. So they also affected the climate with the canopy cover and the oxygen production. Also because they suck up the water and vaporize it, so they're getting the climate warm, moist, and yeah, they distributed the water more evenly than we see today. The water was kind of like not gathered in the way it is now in the ocean. It was more inside the trees, and it was more water in the air, and so yeah, nowadays the water probably is really not distributed like before. So, and fruits grew everywhere all the time, so it was all the time season, and these are things you can also find in many ancient scriptures, and yeah, and also the the trees were kind of connected like a web, and the astral light, the green light, they were spreading the light across the earth. So, and that was giving off some healing vibes all the time. So the air and the food and the light and the chemicals in the air of the trees, and also everything was balanced, and the magnetism was balanced, and therefore the biochemistry was balanced, because everything is magnetism also on the chemical level. So that means when it was balanced, there were no toxins, and because this environment was so balanced, it was healing, and we were able to regenerate very well. Yeah, our bodies is made to regenerate all the time, and this environment enabled us to do so, and we had eternal health and youth and life. There was no death. So the tree of life of the ancient is real. And I found this picture here, and it's showing you that cutting down the trees, it brings death. So also cutting down trees destroys the environment, and the death of the environment, and the death of everything that's in it. And before it was life promoting, and now it's, yeah, we can live for a while in it, but our body doesn't handle it, or like all the organisms, they kind of die. So they die, and yeah, so we live in the land of the death, of the dead and death. So we see aging, and that is all because of wickedness and selfishness. So, and the Bible tells us here that it doesn't have to be that way. In Revelation, they say, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, and there will be no more death. So Kwasi always points out the fountain of youth and eternal life. So that's what we're going to find when we restore this place and bring forth heaven on earth again. Like in the golden age, like in the times where the giant trees were still standing. And yeah, just quick a description on how the cutting of the trees has terraformed our earth. So when we look around, we see mountains on many places, in different shapes, and some of them are remains of silica trees, and some are just like piles of waste, and you also see kind of like mining fields and like quarry sites. Sand and rocks are like parts of the giant trees that were ground and yeah, just turned into little pieces. And the water distribution, like I mentioned before, has drastically changed, because trees and plants, they're just like sponges. They store a huge amount of water. But when the trees were destroyed, the water was released. So that has caused the flood. I think we still live in the times of the flood. The flood is kind of still here, and Kwasi is a plumber, and if Kwasi is here to restore the water cycle, okay, because nowadays the water cycle is really out of balance. So we had the flood before, and this time the earth gonna be changed, but from the heavens. It's gonna come from the sky. So the water that was released from the trees, it gathered in the low altitude regions of earth. Like water always finds its path and accumulates. Yeah, and that has caused the flood, and the giant body of water we see, the ocean, it's basically just one ocean. That's how the ocean was formed. And in other regions, the water, because of the lack of giant trees, there is no more water at all, and it's also void. It's like there's no life in the water. So, and in science, they're also telling you, and also in movies, that the desert and especially the Sahara, they talk about the Sahara that it was once green, and that was on the time when the giant trees were still standing. Also, this modern water cycle, this post-giant tree water cycle or post-flood water cycle, causes the weather. So because of the water on the surface of the ocean is being vaporized into the air, huge clouds can form, and we see catastrophic weather because of that. So storms and heavy rain, but also droughts. That's is part of the land of the death, because with giant trees this doesn't happen. The water is not being the water doesn't just accumulate like this in the sky and on the land. So there was a time before weather, and also weather and time originally mean the same. So in the Golden Age there was no catastrophic weather, and etymology tells us that weather, in Latin tempestas, also originally meant time. And Revelation 21 tells us, like, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. Meaning that when giant trees will grow again, because we're gonna bring forth heaven on earth, and with it the giant trees, and when they grow again, they will absorb the water again and restore the Golden Age water cycle. Okay? That's part of bringing forth heaven on earth, is to restore the vegetation and all, like bringing back the ancient life forms.